Hello, everybody, and welcome to Open Dialogue. This evening's webinar is titled Rigour and Inclusion, Developing Disabled Dance Artists. My name is Suzie Birchwood, and I'm a disabled dancer and dance educator. My pedagogical approach is in inclusive practice, informed by universal design. I trained vocationally as a non-disabled dancer in classical dance until the age of 17, and then acquired my disability and needed to find different routes back into dance, which I did eventually. I am the founder and artistic director of inclusive dance company Silver Birch, associate artist for the former G Dance, and I have worked as a guest artist with Ballet Cymru, Scottish Ballet, Stopgap and Canduco. Please settle in, and I'm just going to run through a few housekeeping things before we begin. As this is a webinar, Zoom functions slightly differently, so everyone joining us as our audience won't be able to use their camera or microphone, only the invited panellists. We will be recording this session. It will only feature the panellists. This will become available afterwards on Stopgap Dance Company's YouTube channel. We have Claudia, our translator this evening. They will simultaneously translate throughout the session. Some of our panel may speak Italian, some may hear to hear the English translation. Please select the interpretation icon, which has a small globe symbol below, and then under Listen In, select English. If you wish to hear the Italian translation, please select the interpretation icon and under Listen In, select Italian. Our interpreter will manually control which language channel that they're speaking on, so you won't need to switch. If you do not want to hear both the original audio and the language channel that you have chosen at the same time, click or untick the original audio option to only hear your audio language channel. We have British and Italian Sign Language interpretation this evening from Michael, Sonia and Antoniella. To select either of these, please click on the interpretation icon and the corresponding interpreter will appear. The interpreter should remain on your screen, but to pin an interpreter, click on the three dots that appear as you hover over the video and click pin. We also have live caption, both in Italian and English. For the Italian captions, please select the CC button along the bottom of your screen and choose Show Closed Captions. The English captions are available via the link that Monique has posted in the chat. They will appear in a separate window in stream text. If you're unable to access the link in the chat, we've included this link on the email on the event and on the Eventbrite page. The link to join is bit.ly/0D1-English with a capital E -captions with a small c. As this is a webinar, we have a Q&A function where you can send us questions throughout the session. Please select the Q&A button at the bottom of your screen and you will be able to ask questions on the panel. If you would like to ask a question using sign language or would prefer to speak your question, please contact Monique and they will be able to assign it so that you can ask your question through the video or microphone. If you're having any difficulty setting up any of the interpretation or translation this evening, please send Monique a message via the Q&A function or email them at monique@stopgap.com. Sorry. I'm going to repeat that, Monique@stopgapdance.com. We would love for you to join in the wider conversation this evening via social media. So please use the hashtag Open Dialogo and tag @StopgapDance and any of our panellists and their organisation. So I should now like to introduce our first panellist, Laura Jones from Stopgap.
Hello there. Thank you, Suzie. So I think first of all, a description of myself. I'm Laura Jones. My pronouns are she, her. I'm Stopgap's co-artistic director, with my focus being on the creative learning and talent development side of the company. I'm a white female with freckles. I have brown wavy hair. I'm wearing, as per usual, purple. This time it's a knitted jumper dress with a big neck, and I'm sat in my wheelchair in my lounge with beige wallpaper and big silvery teal flowers behind me. So to start this conversation, I think it's helpful for us to actually think about what we mean by inclusion and Rigour, what it means to us. And that's something that I often ask at teacher training sessions that I lead. And the responses are all fairly standard, fairly typical. So for inclusion, it makes people think of it being accessible for all, adaptive, welcoming, diverse, open, and non-judgmental. Whereas for Rigour, the responses are that it means it's challenging, it's rigid, it's discipline, there's a quality of work and aiming for excellence, and that it's demanding. So these both sound quite different, quite opposites almost. However, there are many ways that they can work together and coexist. One example of this is a tool that we regularly use, both in our community work, throughout that, and also through our professional practice. And we call this open language. By open language, I mean language that includes and enables everyone to participate to their full potential rather than being excluded. So it's usually non-body part specific to give people the option to choose which body part they're working with, and it may have a particular quality or texture associated with it, rather than using language leaning back on, for example, traditional dance jargon that might not mean anything to some people. So it's inclusive as it gives people the option to make the most relevant choice for their physicality, but also it's rigorous because it asks people to think for themselves and have a deeper individual connection to their movement. So why for us are these both important? Well, if Rigour means aiming for excellence, then that's just as relevant to disabled people as it is to non-disabled people. But disabled people often face attitudinal barriers, that people have low expectations of them. They assume that maybe they're only capable of joining fun sessions with no particular outcome, maybe just improvisation. But however, for in order to be truly inclusive and equitable, disabled people should be able to access rigorous quality dance experiences and training, just as their non-disabled peers do. So they deserve to be given the tools and the support that they need to be able to excel and, should they wish to be able to pursue a career in dance. Not only is this important to change the dance ecology to become more representative, which is incredibly important, but also lessons that are learned in unpicking traditional dance training and rebuilding it in a more equitable and accessible way actually benefit everyone. However, there has been a long history of inequality, not just in dance and dance training, but in society in general. And this needs addressing. So what is Stopgap doing to this? Well, we've been aware of this lack of equality. And so some of our programs that work to address this are Iris, which is our dance syllabus. It's an accessible dance syllabus, open to all, but it's specifically aimed at young disabled dancers. It aims to give quality experiences, both for those who enjoy the social element of coming together to learn and dance together, but it also has a clear structure and progression and development for those dedicated dancers who wish to take it further. There's a specific ethos around the teaching that we focus on key skills and principles, and we start with them, introducing them maybe through games or explorations, and then the set exercises come later, and they're a vehicle, a way to demonstrate and put the skill into practice, rather than expecting that people will be able to pick up a skill just by trying to mimic a teacher who may well have a different physicality to them. So again, this is inclusive because it centers around individual self-discovery and learning, but it's rigorous because it works to specific key skills. From this, we've also developed Dance for Kids with Iris, taking a similar idea, adding its online dance videos with added access elements, particularly embedded audio description. And our feedback has been that actually the audio description benefits all the children, not just those that it was specifically aimed at. We also have a teacher training program, Seedbed, which is a course led by dance artists with a range of experience of disabilities to support teachers to make their practice more inclusive. We've used our knowledge to develop and deliver 2 cohorts of SG2, our apprentice company that supports emerging disabled dancers, gives them the opportunity to develop their skills within a company setting. So the landscape is changing, and other companies and organisations are doing more to develop their offer to open and be more inclusive. You'll hear some more other things from the other panellists, but it's a long journey. And the thing is that having access to training that is comparable to their non-disabled peers is rare, a rare exception rather than the norm. So the development of this is still needed at all levels of training, through early years, children, further training, professional training, and to training current leaders and teachers to have the skills to teach in a more inclusive way that benefits everyone.
Laura, thank you so much. This is Suzie speaking. That was really, really helpful. I think I'm really excited now to hear from Martin at Tin Arts. So I shall hand over to you, Martin.
Thank you, Suzie. My name is Martin Wilson. My pronouns are he, him. I am the director at Tin Arts. I'm a white male with a brown beard and very little hair. I have glasses and I'm wearing a green shirt. I'm sat at a desk in my office and have a beige background. And for my presentation, I am reading from prepared notes. Tin Arts is a dance organisation based in the northeast of England. We provide a range of dance programmes and activities that are inclusive and open to all. Activities are led by a team of dance artists and take place in our dance space in Durham City or in schools and community locations across our region. All of our work is contemporary dance in style, and much of our work leads to creation of new work by participants for presentation in theatres and outdoor settings. You can start dancing with Tin Arts from the age of 2. As you get older, you can move through a series of different classes that start to develop your technique in dance, as well as offer you greater range and opportunities for creating and devising new work. For those who develop a real passion and interest in dance, we try to offer continuing support and progression opportunities. For some, most commonly those who are non-disabled, the opportunities exist to attend college or university to undertake high-level dance training and take a step closer to a career in dance. With over 50% of participants taking part in Tin Arts classes identifying as disabled, with a strong representation of learning disability, for many of our younger dancers, as they get older and start to think about the next step, attending college or university for high-level dance training is rarely an option due to a number of reasons. One is the need to be able to engage in relatively non-flexible academic study alongside the practical elements within dance. Another is a need to be able to thrive within a group setting where it can be more difficult to cater for and make adaptations for individual needs. At Tin Arts, we have undertaken work to address this inequality of opportunity. We are a relatively small community-based dance organisation with one dance studio and limited financial resource. We aren't able to provide a full-time, high-level dance training programme for those not able to go to college or university. But over 24 years, we have developed a strong, inclusive practice that we believe supports talented young disabled dancers to grow, thrive, and excel in dance. We may have been working with smaller numbers of dancers, and the work has been taking place within our young people's programs or within a community dance setting, but this doesn't mean the level of training or development has been less ambitious or less challenging. In 2015, one of our young emerging dance artists with learning disability, who had only ever danced at school and at Tin Arts, auditioned for and was selected to join the National Youth Dance Company. George Williams was 24 at the time, and since then, George has continued to perform and tour across the UK with Tin Arts and as an independent artist. What George experienced at Tin Arts was a practice that aimed to offer all who attend our programs the rigour, technique, and discipline that can be found in high-level dance training within an environment that is inclusive of each person's individual needs and offers a person-centered, bespoke approach to dance training. With George, we were able to focus in on his needs and set a training pathway and plan that worked for him. In 2017, we formalised this approach into a project called the Talent Hub in partnership with Yorkshire Dance. The Talent Hub ran for 3 years and was a pilot that aimed to test how our practice could work at scale in a larger group context. 10 disabled dance artists from across the northeast of England and Yorkshire came together as one cohort to explore how best they could be supported and enabled to progress in their careers collectively and individually. Most of the dance artists joining were new to Tin Arts. Many had exhausted the options available to them, as they were now too old to be members of young people's groups, or as dancers taking part in community-based activities, they felt they were no longer being challenged, and this was not the setting from which they would be able to make progress as a dance artist. All were highly talented dance artists who were ready to shift from being what might be described as an emerging artist to take their place as a dance artist in the dance sector. Like many programs, there was a lot of positive learning, as well as identification of challenges and barriers. One key challenge was around perception. All Talent Hub dance artists were encouraged to continue to take regular class in the place where they lived whilst the project ran. But for many, we were unable to find suitable classes that contained both the right level of rigour and were inclusive. For those members who were able to identify a suitable class, which in our view would be an open professional dance class, the experience and training our dance artists had gathered in a community setting was often not recognised as formal training, and therefore they were not considered to have the required technique or skill to be able to engage in a professional dance class setting. So this would indicate that within our dance sector, there is a perception that you cannot acquire the skills and training needed to succeed as a dance artist in a community setting. I think this is because when an activity is framed as inclusive, it is assumed it lacks rigour. That to include everybody must equal compromise. To ensure rigour, you cannot embed inclusion. I'm sure many of you will agree that just stating those words, they don't make sense. And they shouldn't be allowed to be the conventional way of thinking. At Tin Arts, we hold tight to the principle that everybody deserves access to the very best opportunities and the highest level of training, regardless of whether these occur in a community setting or otherwise. We aim to instill in each and every person who engages with us an ambition and a belief that anything is possible. And this stretches beyond the individual we work with and extends to the family and those who support each person. As I mentioned earlier in my presentation, you can start dancing with Tin Arts from 2 years old. And it is from these first classes that young people start to experience the combination of rigor and inclusion. An environment where all are included, all are challenged, all are offered the tools to thrive and grow, all believe that there is a pathway and it is open for all to follow. And what this does is start to build a greater understanding and expectation with family and friends and address perceptions. It reinforces the principle that young disabled people have the same right as anybody else to take part in dance, should be given the same opportunities to develop a passion for dance, should be supported to access the very best training in dance, and that a future or a career in dance is possible. The need to shift beyond perception and to build an expectation. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Martin. I found that really particularly poignant to have the entire family support, and that really vital aspect of having the changing perceptions, of making that shift with the family on board. I'm now really excited to introduce Aristide, independent dance artist.
Good evening and welcome to everyone. I'm so happy to be here with you tonight. Thank you for the invitation. My name is Aristide Rontini. My pronoun is him. I'm a white man in his 40s. I have dark hair, very short, now thinning. I have brown eyes. I wear big glasses. I have a beard and a mustache. My right arm is shorter than my left arm and extends to the elbow joint. I'm wearing a black sports jacket. I'm in a hotel room and the background is blurred. I am a performer, choreographer, and dance practitioner in community settings. I'm a member of Aldiqua Artists, the first Italian association of performing arts workers with disabilities that promotes the self-responsibility and rights of persons with disabilities, both as professionals working in the performing arts system and in terms of the audience that enjoys artistic works. These evenings webinar gives me the opportunity to ask a couple of questions and look back at my own training. What do we mean by rigor? What did I need to develop a rigorous attitude during my training and later as a performer? I will start from the second question. In 2010, I graduated from the Rotterdam Dance Academy. It is rare in Europe for a person with a disability to have access to high-level academic training. And I think that that was possible because the then artistic director of the academy did not see my disability as a limitation. And in the evaluation phase, it was more a recognition of a potential that counted and that I could cultivate and grow there at the academy. And my disability, you see, does not have an impact on the environment or the training context in a disruptive way. It is not something that challenges practices and ways because my body is pretty close to the idea of a ordinary body. Having attended an academy made of assiduous and constant practice stimulated me to be rigorous. Although the training was stimulating and enriching, there were some disabling situations, especially when there were movement phrases that I could not perform and I was required to adapt. And I could adapt, but it was me having to adapt. I was the one making the effort because I was the person with a body different than the bodies of the majority of people in the room. So I was the exception. In doing so, this adaptation remained isolated. I was not part of the group. It was my responsibility, my disability. It was not an experience of the group. And in those situations that were not very frequent, though I must say that it is not so that the teacher always knew how to adapt the material to my body, certainly due to lack of experience of working and with disabled people. And on my part, I did not formulate my need. So I can only imagine how the dynamics of this situation would have been even more complicated if instead of my body there had been a less conforming body. Working with disabled minds and bodies is something else. So I asked myself whether it was worthwhile continuing at the academy in that situation. And so, you see, at the time, I did not know about experiences and companies with artists with disabilities. I felt alone. I did not have a set of ideas that could help me vision and envision my future. So this also has an impact on Rigour. Now, I would like to go back to the first question that was asked: what does Rigour mean? If Rigour is the severity by which you simply abide by a rule, then we should ask about the rule and the standard we refer to, and who contributed to defining those norms that then were applied to dance and the code of dance. I would say that the first step is to recognize that this is a convention elaborated and passed on by the bodies and minds of artists without disabilities who have had and have the privilege of having access to artistic practice, and recognize that a segment of society has been excluded from it. This is the first step. So we should also ask ourselves what aesthetic of Rigour are we referring to? And again, what norms are we applying? Because for me, working with minds and bodies with disabilities, for me, does not mean adapt to what is done by able-bodied dancers, but recognizing different laws that govern those bodies and remaining loyal to them, stimulating them, discovering them instead of excluding them. It really means to develop an authentic relationship with one's own body and mind. This means allowing those bodies and minds to become the center of irradiation that gives shape to choreographic and performative practices and principles that, when transferred onto the stage, reflect different forms of existence and aesthetics and views of the world, relations with the world. It also means asking able-bodied leaders to adapt to the needs present in the situation. And then I would like also to reflect for a moment on the history of dance, because the dimension of dance has generally expanded, and roles also have been questioned, asking who could or could not dance. And this also entailed questioning what physical, mental skills should be possessed by dancers. Well, in recent decades, people with disabilities have started to be part of this history as presences, no longer as absences. And in my opinion, people with disabilities are just one more frontier in this movement. Thank you very much.
Aristide, thank you so much for that. Thank you very much to Laura, Martin and Aristide there, 3 really in-depth and fascinating insights into the question of rigour and inclusion. We now have a period of time where we can have our Q&A. So I'll invite all of the panellists to awaken. As they come on, I'll have a quick witter. I do apologise that I have not given my visual description. So I will take just a couple of minutes to do that, if that's okay. I am a white woman. I have long blonde hair. I'm wearing orange, which is my youngest son's second favourite colour. So it's one of the colours that I'm permitted to wear today. My background is blurred, really because it looks quite tidy as it is, but I've got quite a lot of toys, mainly wheeled toys, Thomas the Tank Engine, various things behind me that I don't think you really want to see. And I am in a little white wheelchair, and which I'm sitting in at my desk. And I have long dangly earrings on today as well. So apologies for that being rather late. And we've got a couple of questions here, which I would like to read and then pass on to our panellists. Panellists, if you particularly want to take one of these questions, then please wave madly at me. If not, I shall pass them on to you. So our first question, how could open language be used in a mixed ability class where some individuals may be unable to think or create movement independently, for instance, due to learning disability? I wonder if I could give that to Laura. Thank you, Laura.
Yes, absolutely, Laura speaking. Yeah, I think it's about how you frame the language and support the language. I mean, my personal experience from the dancers with learning disabilities that I've worked with is that they are generally actually very creative, but equally, if maybe they've not had opportunities to explore their creative side, maybe it might be starting with some exploration. So, for example, some tasks that we do, we might use pictures to support. So maybe we also have a picture that is related to the word. For example, if it's whoosh, maybe there's a rocket, and take some time to explore each of these, to explore freely that, so they can really find an embodiment of it. And we might maybe in a session pick 2 or 3 words that we're going to work with, take some time to explore them so that they're familiar, and then we might then use them to put into what sometimes I call a movement framework. So you have like the frame or a movement score of the open language that they can then work with. It might be if they still need some support with decision making. Also, it could be that it's free, that they don't need to choose it and set it, that the order is set, but each time they repeat, it might be with a different body part. But equally, it might be that I use some things that I call like choice cards, where I've got the different options of different body parts, different levels, that they can use those choice cards to support them. Also using things like giving some context or examples, like floating like a feather, dashing like you're late for a bus, bringing in props. Props are an excellent way to support kind of finding that textural movement. Yeah, and just kind of really tuning it to the group that you're working with.
Thank you, Laura. I think that Arden said that very clearly and succinctly. The next question is for Martin at Tin Arts. Is the talent development programme continuing? What's next? Any plans for both Stopgap and Tin Arts to widen their geographical reach, expand to a national programme? Are your evaluations of all of these projects available to read? Are they public for shared learning? So Martin, I shall pass that to you. Thank you.
Thank you. And I'll try to provide a few answers that talk to those things, but also keep this rooted in the Italian and UK kind of learning stuff, so it's not too specific to us. So whilst the Talent Hub itself as a project doesn't exist because of the funding that was awarded for that, within Tin Arts, we continue to be passionate about developing talent development as a strand of our work. And in our most recent funding agreement with Arts Council, talent development is there as a core piece of work. So talent development continues. Often the funding changes, so you have to adapt what you do and how you work. We're doing that work slightly broader. So we as an organisation in the northeast of England are looking at the north of England, but also in conversation with Laura quite recently and other organisations, we're starting to think about how we connect nationally to look at our opportunities that we're working and to find ways of working together, because it's a shared, I suppose it's a shared sum of our parts that will make the stronger case for what we're doing. And so going behind that is actually one of the things about how do you share learning from programs? And I've got a slightly two-sided answer. So there's lots of learning that is held within our kind of minds and conversation internally, and we're trying to find better ways of sharing that learning externally. So some of our evaluations are there publicly available to read, and some of them just haven't made it yet to that place. And that goes back to a little bit what Laura's talking about. We're trying to find the most accessible formats and ways that that information is shared, because it's not just a case of picking up an evaluation that might be written for a funder and putting that out in public, because the language is difficult and it talks about certain funding. So talent development continues. We are looking at national plans and ways we can work together, and we're trying to find ways of using our learning from programs to build that upon, and where we can make it open, we're sharing it.
Thank you, Martin. Laura, I wonder if I could ask you to add anything from a Stopgap point of view.
Sorry, I was looking at the other questions and getting myself prepared. Can you just remind me of that one?
Of course, sorry, Suzie speaking. Is the talent, I'll move on from that, sorry. Any plans for both Stopgap and Tin Arts to widen their geographical reach, expand to a national programme? Are your evaluations of all of these projects available to read? Are they available for public sharing?
Yeah. Yeah, absolutely as well. I mean, part of our kind of the national and international reach is these projects that we've been doing with the Italian artists. We do quite often take both the performance company, but also creative learning company do travel to deliver performances and training. The seedbed teacher training that I mentioned is online, so it is it does have international reach. It's running at the moment, and we have this year we have someone being very committed in New Zealand, so it's 5 a.m. when they join us. Yes, so that is that. Yeah, we are working towards, but also acknowledging that we have limited resources, limited funding, so trying to make our work as useful as possible within the resources that we have. But yes, we do. And yeah.
Sorry, Laura, actually, I'm just going to jump to another question, which ties in with that really nicely. Is it possible to access the Stopgap Iris training from anywhere in the world?
Yes, I was going to come on to that. Yeah, good question. So at the moment, the progression for teachers, because we realised, having worked really hard, and it's taken many years of developing the Iris syllabus and kind of really working towards getting it the most accessible and the most relevant, including that Rigour. It's taken a long time. And then having put all that effort in, we wanted to then make sure that, it could spread, it could become more national, more global, but we needed to also that reassurance that the quality of delivery was there. And this is why we created Seedbed, this online course. So the progress is that we ask people to complete Seedbed first, which is online. At the moment, Iris, it's learning that is, and the way to deliver it, And the way it works, it's a summer intensive that is UK based. We are looking at how we can develop that with our learning from delivering Seabed online, how it could be delivered online, but appreciating that it's complex and it's not something we want to do badly. We want to, so we are looking towards it. So at some point, yes.
Thank you, Laura.
And in fact, just to say, we do already have some people, there's one of artist who's worked with us, teacher who's worked with us, who's based in Malta, and they are delivering Iris in Malta. So, but they did come to the UK to train.
Suzie speaking. That's great, Laura. So it is global. That's fantastic. It's great to have that much access. I love this next question, and Aristide, I'm going to ask you to take this if that's okay. How do you convince disabled children and young people to pursue dancing if they don't think they will have a pathway to progress? And I'd like, Aristide, if you wouldn't mind taking that first, that would be wonderful.
Thank you so much for your question. Well, I believe that for a child, a young person with a disability, with the technology that we have today, and knowing that there are many companies of inclusive dance in the world, also offering videos online. So being that the situation for a child, having the possibility to watch those videos online, it is really something that opens up their imagination and motivates and convinces. It is a way to uproot an idea which is absolutely rooted in all disabled children, including myself. When I was a child, I thought I could never dance. But you see, there are in Italy too artists and companies with disabilities that perform and can be seen. So one strategy would be to have children go and watch what they do. And then another strategy is that of looking locally whether there are inclusive, welcoming activities, and you take the child there so that they can watch what is going on without urging them to participate from the very beginning, but so that they have an idea and develop a desire to participate. So the other side is to have productions for children with disabilities by disabled artists. Thank you for the question, because you actually made me think that we could do more for children with our work. So thank you very much, and I hope that I answered your question.
Suzie speaking. Thank you so much, Aristide. I'd like Laura as well to jump in on this, but not before I happen to mention that prior to my needing to use a wheelchair permanently, I happened to see the lovely Laura Jones in a Stopgap production at the Old Town Hall in Hemel Hempstead. And that was my way in, or one of my ways in. And now I shall pass over to you.
Thank you. Yeah, I think representation is such an important thing. The challenge is that, a bit like I mentioned last week, this, where do you start, the kind of chicken and egg, that in order for dancers, young aspiring disabled dancers, to perceive that they might be able to pursue a career, they need to be able to see role models, but these role models also need the training to get there. So I think it is gradually starting to change, and I think it's not just something that needs addressing or we're working to address in the dance sector. I think it is across media in general, and I think that is slowly changing. One of the other things as well that is, it's not just about convincing or supporting the young dancers, it's also the family and attitudes of the family. As Martin mentioned, there's kind of the whole approach of the family, and also other gatekeepers. You know, we have had experience of people who've come to our sessions regularly and then been told, oh yes, but you won't be able to dance, so don't worry, don't take it further. Yeah, it's a challenge, but I think it's making sure that there is quality provision, making sure there are role models, and indeed not just maybe tucked away in theatres, but bringing it to, as much as possible, the mainstream, and to things that's suitable for a younger audience as well.
Thank you, Laura. Suzie speaking. I'd like to pass the next question to Martin, if that's okay. Sorry, Martin, I've given you no preparation for that whatsoever, but you shall answer it very succinctly, I know. How is it possible to include in a dance class people with different disabilities, such as blind and deaf dancers?
Okay, so Martin speaking, sorry. So there's a long answer and a short answer, and I think we have time for a short answer today. The way we work, and I think it's really interesting to point out that every dance company, Stopgap, Canduco, Coralie, ourselves, we have lots of conversations, but we also understand how we have different practices that are inclusive, but we've structured ourselves a bit differently. The way Tin Arts would approach a class that seeks to bring people together from different abilities or different backgrounds or different disabilities is to look at the barriers and to understand how people are looking to engage and where the barriers are around them engaging. So there isn't necessarily one answer and go, that's how you do it. But actually what we found over the years, our best answers has been about conversation and communication and understanding that a dance space is a space where collaboration happens, that the hierarchy of leader and pupil, if you like, is flat, and it's a space we build together. And if you build the space together, the person who has the most expertise around engaging or involved deaf people is a deaf person. And that's the person who has the most lived experience of that disability. So actually, it's kind of quite a short answer. It's about an open conversation and creating a space where people can talk from their place of experience, and you build the environment in that space. In many ways, I'm sure I'm not prompting Laura to follow, but Laura might kind of be able to add to that as well, actually.
Laura speaking.
Yes, so I will pass to you, Laura. Yes, indeed. Thank you, Laura.
Yes, Laura speaking. Yeah, absolutely. I think there are naturally some access elements and access requirements that can clash. So one of the things is about making sure you have options and multiple ways in. So whilst for someone a completely non-verbal dance class experience might be useful, that all the information is visual, that might not work for, as you said, someone who's visually impaired. So can you bring in multiple? So maybe it's careful use of language alongside imagery, alongside maybe it's the music that supports, maybe it's the demonstration. So there's bringing in lots of different routes in. Equally, for some people, they may find an approach that is abstract. So like I mentioned, thinking about props or different things with different textures that might support them. For other people, they might appreciate a more concrete and anatomical way in. The challenge is trying to bring in these different layers without being overwhelming and without being too much. So it's taking your time, getting to know the group, and very much, as Martin said, this collaboration that actually, as the teacher or the leader, you're coming with your knowledge of dance, but remembering that the dancers are coming with their knowledge of their bodies and their experience. And I think opening up that conversation is really key.
Thanks, Laura. Suzie speaking. I'd like to, well, I've got a question for Aristide here. I was really interested in your point, Aristide, regarding the notion of adaptation in relation to the historical practice of passing down of that dance vocabulary. How do you think disabled dance artists can reclaim this practice? Thank you. We'll just need to make just a couple of seconds just while the translations goes through for Aristide.
It is such a big question. So it's huge. From my viewpoint, in relation to my disability, and I think also for other disabilities, adaptation is possible, but the point is to understand whether training programs as they are conceived still mirrors reality, and if they are inclusive, because you see, there is already a self-selection when a program is made. You have already selected bodies in a way. And so you see, my training experience entailed that I practiced historic dance movements. I imitated with no room, not a lot of room for improvising. There was not so much time to think about adaptation. So I'm referring to my own experience. In that academy, it was like that. Of course, there are different schools and different academies, but you see, we should leave room to exploration and ask questions about languages, the new languages, but actually I do not have an answer.
Thank you. Thank you, Aristide. Suzie speaking. I've got a lovely meaty question here, which I'd like to pass to Laura, but I'd be interested for everybody to come in on. So this is from a Google translation, so apologies if it's not 100% accurate. Do you think it is possible to eliminate the use of a wheelchair in studio and choreography? How does anyone in the chair perceive the chair material as a functional part of their body or as an obstacle? Laura, to you. Thank you.
Thank you. Laura speaking. Yes, that's a lot in that question. So I think, I suppose from my point of view, and also actually Suzie and I both delivered on Seedbed last week a session on dancers who use mobility aids, from crutches to wheelchairs to walking frames. And one of the points that we were talking about is that there is a stigma, there's a stigma around mobility aids, partly because often the symbol for disability is a wheelchair. So people often perceive a wheelchair as disabling, whereas actually they are enabling. They allow movement, they allow freedom, and the same of other mobility aids too. And that actually, rather than seeing these aids as negative and as something to be hidden, they're not. They enable, and they not only do they enable, but they give greater possibilities. There are movements that I can do with my wheelchair that is impossible to do if you're standing on legs. So removing that ableist lens that assumes, oh, we need to take away something that shows difference and actually work towards, okay, what is possible? What opportunities to do does this give? Yeah, is the way that I would I want to approach work and dance.
I'd love to add to that, Laura, if that's okay. Suzie speaking. I'm a dancer who uses both crutches and a wheelchair, depending on how my body is at the time. And I love, when I'm using my crutches, the line that can create, the extension, this beautiful kind of line which just goes on and on and on, the hover that I can achieve on my crutches, the glide in my wheelchair, the terrifying looking balances in my chair. As Laura said, it is our movement aids, our different bodies are full of potential. They are full of excitement, of creativity, and that really is what we're all about and what we're all here for. It's because we want to be creative, and these are opportunities. So, would anybody else like to hop in on that question? Would you like a reminder of what the question was? It's about, do you think it is possible to eliminate the use of a wheelchair in a studio and choreography? How does anyone in the chair perceive the chair material as a functional part of their body or as an obstacle? Martin, could I ask you to give your comments on that? And then I think it's probably going to be time for me to wrap up, actually.
Yeah, sure. I guess, and as a kind of summative point, really, and I think what this question talks about, and some of the other questions talked about, is what kind of dance are we looking to create and produce in our country? I mean, and maybe in both countries. And I would say it's about a dance that represents the culture of our country and the people within our country. So that includes all people, regardless of wheelchair user, non-wheelchair user, deaf, blind, and all levels and abilities. But underneath it is an ambition to create the greatest art that tells the greatest stories and shows the best of all of us. So kind of the answer to the question you just asked specifically is, I too enjoy the kind of the broadening of horizons that comes from dancers from different backgrounds and different perspectives and different ways of moving, brings into the kind of creative hot pot. But then actually what we're trying to do is build a society that recognizes that breadth and celebrates it. And therefore the representation dancers brings through the next cohort of young dancers who believe that they too can take that progression and that pathway forwards, which kind of captures back that question, but also talks maybe to the last 5 or 6 questions a little bit.
Suzie speaking. Martin, thank you so much. I'm afraid that's all we have time for today. Many apologies if we didn't get round to answering your questions. I was reading them, and as I was reading them, I was thinking, oh, these are so meaty. This could go on for ages and ages. Some brilliant questions. If you want to reach out to any of the panel, then please contact Stopgap via their website. I think I've got just a couple of minutes to introduce the next webinar, which is Creative Access for Dance Audiences, 7th of June, 5 to 6 p.m. UK time, 6 to 7 p.m. Italian time. Discover the imaginative ways in which inclusive artists have made their work accessible to disabled audiences. The webinar will also demonstrate how creative access can open a new creative frontier. I think that actually brings together so much of what we've discussed here, and I look forward to hearing and attending myself. Thank you so much. I wish you all a very good night, and I hope that you have a wonderful rest of the week. Thank you.